Hello and welcome. This is Russ Puryear with Solix Technologies. We're going to go ahead and start one of our webinars called Optimize and Secure Your Test Data. This is Russ Puryear. I'm the Vice President for Solix Technologies. I've been with Solix for a little over 10 years in multiple capacities, sales and sales support. And I'd like to introduce John Ottman, who's the Executive Chairman of Solix as well. John?
Yep, thank you, Russ. My name is John Ottman. I'm Executive Chairman of Solix. Been in the enterprise data management arena for quite a while here. And what we want to do is we want to take you through just a quick discussion on test data management challenges and strategy, and I'll talk to you about that. And then I'm going to hand it over to Russ, and then he's going to speak more specifically on some of the technical details of the different strategy options for test data management. So we appreciate your time today. We think we should hopefully be finished in half an hour or so. And at the end of the session, we should be able to take some questions. Ready to go, Russ?
Yes, and let me just add to that, the way we'll be taking the questions, if you can go ahead and send those to us via chat, I'll note those, and then we'll go ahead and respond to the questions at the end. So again, if you can just send your questions via chat, we'll capture those, and then we'll respond at the end. One other thing I'd like to add is if everybody could go ahead and put their phones on mute, just so we're sure to block any background noise. All right, John, let me go ahead and turn it over to you and let you go through the first couple slides.
Okay, so Russ, you got control of the slides here. So just a quick overview of Solix Technologies. We're headquartered in Santa Clara, California, about 125 employees, and our target market is enterprise information management. And specifically, we target the data management issues around database archiving, test data management, application retirement, and also masking of data. We have a mission statement as a company, which is to help organize the world's enterprise information with optimized infrastructure, data security, and analytics. So we really want to try to help you organize your enterprise data. We have approximately 2,000 customers worldwide, and sales and service partners listed here. Most of the traditional systems integrators that are quite well known in the marketplace. We also maintain partnerships with Cloudera and Hortonworks and the Apache Foundation. Pardon me. In regards to our recent announcement of support for Apache Hadoop and our big data solution, we found that Apache Hadoop is an outstanding platform to store bulk amounts of data. And also, we're an OEM partner with Oracle, Kronos, and ASG. Next slide, please, Russ. Also, exciting news for Solix customers and also the customers that we're working with going forward into the future is we were recently appointed to the Leaders Quadrant in Gartner's Magic Quadrant for enterprise archiving and application retirement. They found our solution to be extremely comprehensive with wide customer satisfaction. They particularly noted our support for big data technology platforms as a differentiator. It was very exciting for us recently to be named as an industry leader. Next slide, Russ. So let's talk about test data management and the challenges in test data management. First of all, running a development organization, at least the ones I've been involved in, always experiencing a rising, increasing demand for more and more test dev copies. Perhaps that coincides with the rise of agile development strategies and short sprints of development, but more and more test dev copies being requested, which puts strain on the organization and questions about the operational efficiency. How do we know how to create test data? Do we know a documented process for it? Is it well established throughout the organization, and can we execute on those documented processes consistently? There's an increased risk of data breach in test and dev instances because many times test and dev isn't treated as seriously as production, when in fact many times there's very, very significant information that's held within non-production instances which must be protected. There's also a lot more non-production data typically in an organization than production data, many times more, meaning the risk of data breach for non-production data is very, very significant. Maintaining referential integrity is a critical element when you're moving data. That's a concern. People want to make sure that all the integrity constraints are intact when they're operating on test data, because it obviously would affect the success of an application. And longer test and refresh cycles. If building test data and refreshing test data is cumbersome and difficult, it doesn't happen as often. And if it doesn't happen as often, then stale test data can lead to unpredictable test results. So it's important to be able to use refresh data as you're going through your development process. And too much data in test instances can be a problem as well, which is why full system clones are typically not a good answer for test data management. Data growth and the test data multiplier effect is really all about how many different copies of production data can be created in order to support test and development environments. It's almost a multiplier effect that can be as you can increase your total storage footprint by maybe as much as 8 times. So you can, the data growth problem is really exacerbated when we're talking about non-production test data. And also application quality management best practices include checking both visible test results as well as the database effects and errors and logs, and this can be impractical to accomplish manually. So these are all big challenges when we're looking at creating test data for projects. Next slide, please, Russ. Compliance is also a big one with test data management, and it starts with Sarbanes-Oxley and what's known as Section 404 of Sarbanes-Oxley, which typically drives organizations to adopt a COBIT-based compliance framework, which basically says that for publicly traded companies, you've got to establish internal controls and procedures, and you must document, test, and maintain those controls and procedures to ensure their effectiveness. Creating test data and properly securing test data is absolutely within the scope of Section 404, and so Sarbanes-Oxley at the very highest level of compliance is one important reason why test data management needs to be handled very carefully. And beyond that, when you get into industry-specific or application-specific compliance requirements such as HIPAA or the payment card industry data security standard, there's additional compliance concerns as well. I list here PCI DSS 6.3, which basically says develop software applications based on industry best practices and incorporate security throughout information security throughout the software development life cycle. That's a PCI requirement, and beyond that it says production data cannot be used for testing or development. That's kind of interesting because one of our goals here is to be able to use production data in test because production data offers your most accurate form of test data. So how do we do that when we're faced with compliance requirements that say we're not allowed to do that? Okay, next slide, please, Russ. So why test data management? We want to be able to enable production data as a source for our test data because it's the most accurate. And every test starts with consistent data to establish a predictable result at the end of the test. So you need to have obviously reliable and consistent baselines for your testing. Inaccurate test data obviously creates poor testing results, which creates coding, rework, cost, time and money and effort. We want to be able to, we're consistently under pressure to be able to refresh test data more frequently as we see more adoption of agile type sprint-oriented development cycles. And we want to be able to manage our storage footprint. If we keep creating clone copies of production, obviously the overall size of our infrastructure can get very large, and storage can be a problem. Finally, establish compliance and control processes for test data creation and to protect sensitive information. We have to do this. This is not an option. So these are the key reasons why test data management is out there today as a solution. Next slide, please, Russ. So some of the best practices for test data management, well, it starts with defining the test data that's required. Too often, developers will just simply take a copy of a production database and say, okay, well, I'll use that for my test. But a lot of times, that's outside of a careful definition process to know, well, how much do I really need? Do I really need all that data? And what data do I need? Automating the test data creation process is also a great best practice. There is room for errors, and if you can have an automated process, you can be more consistent and predictable. Maintaining referential integrity is probably one of the biggest concerns, and it's got to be one of the most important best practices, so that your test data has all the integrity constraints that it requires to simulate a production environment. You've got to be able to discover and classify your sensitive data. A lot of people start by saying, well, do I even know what my sensitive data is? Do I have policies in place for that? And once we've been able to define and set a policy for sensitive data, we've got to scan and classify the data in the database to know what's sensitive. And once that's done, we want to try to mask sensitive data in the test data creation process so that it's never, ever exposed to the outside. And that's when we talk about masking data on the fly. So at no time is your test data, your sensitive test data, ever exposed. It gets masked before it's exposed. Next slide, please, Russ. So the strategies that Solix is embarked upon here, and what we're recommending, is number one, subset versus clone. Clone is never, almost never, the best way to create test data. It certainly is not a right-sized amount of data at the very least, let alone is it very facile to be able to be moved around. So right-sized subsetting versus cloning is a big emphasis in a strategy for test data management. And deploying subset policies based on application metadata versus and subset volumes. I mean, policies that are driven in an automated way create speed and reduce errors. Discover and mask all sensitive data. This is critical strategy to test data management. 58 million credit cards were exposed last week at Home Depot. That was not out of a non-production environment, but not too long ago, Yahoo had a tremendous breach, almost as big, which was out of non-production data. So making sure that all sensitive data is discovered and masked properly is critical to the process, and doing it in an automated way. And then finally, critical to manage clones for your multiple enterprise applications that you need to create test data for. And I'm going to let Russ go into that in more detail in his presentation. But what I wanted to do is just sort of say, here's sort of the challenges, here's some of the high-level strategies and some of the best practices. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Russ and get into it in a little bit more detail from a product perspective. Russ.
Great. Thank you, John. So what I want to do over the next couple of minutes here is give you a high-level overview of the approach that Solix offers to create these subsets. As John talked about, really the objective here is to create what we call the right size test environment, meaning test may require a certain amount of data to be in the system. Development may need a smaller subset. Training may need even a smaller subset. So one of the ideas behind the subsetting process is to provide a subset that meets your particular requirements. The goal of subsetting is to reduce the storage footprint. So one of the questions people always ask is, can I create a clone faster if I'm using subsetting? And the answer is typically not. The real objective is to reduce the size. Obviously, we've got to go through a more involved process than you would if you were just doing a snap or just to break a mirror if you're using something like EMC. But the goal here, again, is to create small subsets, right-size subsets, and reduce your storage footprint. One of the things that's unique about Solix is we offer multiple methods, and I'm going to walk through what those different methods are. And I think what you'll see is, depending on your requirements, will dictate which method you use. So the first thing is, what we really talk about is a criteria-based subsetting, meaning you can define multiple criteria. Obviously, one of those criteria is date, so I want to create a subset that maybe has 3 months of data or 6 months of data in it. But I can also base it on other things, such as operating unit. One of our clients uses this system to create a subset for North America. Then they'll create another subset they use for testing in Europe. So you can do it on multiple criteria. You could do it based on set of books, org ID, etc. And what I'm going to talk about primarily is how we create subsets for Oracle Business Suite. But the same process can be used for not only Oracle Business Suite, but for custom applications as well, PeopleSoft, JD Edwards, etc. The other thing that's a little bit unique about our approach, and John touched on this, is our ability to mask data on the fly. So as part of this process, not only can we create a small subset, but as we're moving the data, we'll mask it so when the data lands on the target environment, it'll be masked at the same time. So let me walk you through the multiple approaches we've got. So the traditional approach is to take a full-size clone of that production data and then to remove the unwanted data. And we can do that in 2 different methods. One is a simple delete. So we have a process where we can identify the tables and all the transactions in the tables required to delete a complete object, and we'll delete those transactions. This method is good if I'm going to remove a small amount of data. Typically, it's going to be less than 30%. The second method is we call a truncate method. And basically what we want to do is now grab the data that we want to maintain, put it into a temporary space, truncate the tables, and then return the data. After we've removed the data, we'll then mask the remaining data that we've got to be sure we don't have any unsecured data. And then we go through a database resize process now to reclaim that space and actually reduce the size of the overall database. This is the traditional way. Many of our competitors offer this approach. And it does fit some needs. If you're going to create remove a very small amount of data, then this is not a bad approach. The limitation, however, is we don't save any time at all, in that obviously you've still got to do the full-size clone. Then you've got to go through the subsetting process. And initially, I'm not saving you any storage, in that you've got to have the full amount of storage to begin with. Then you go through this resize process. So one of our clients in the logistics business asked us to create a method that would allow them to create small subsets without having to have the full amount of storage to begin with. So this is what we call our gold insert method. And this is the method that's most often used by our customers who are subsetting Oracle Business Suite. what they'll do is they'll go ahead and make a copy of production, and this copy of production is what I'm going to use when I'm pulling data out to insert into the subsets that I'm going to create. It's not a required step. You could actually pull that data directly from production, but many customers will go ahead and want to have a create this copy of the system so they can do all their work without interfering with the production system. What we're going to do is create what we call a gold master. And basically the gold master will have everything in it but transactional data. We will actually go through and create the application tier. We'll create an empty database. We'll then populate it with all the master data, setup data, lookup data, basically everything but the transactional data. The beauty of this approach is I will create that database initially small based on what I expect that database to be. So if I've got in this case, a 15 terabyte database, if I'm expecting my final database to be 5 terabytes, then I'll create that production database starting at I'll create that test database based on 5 terabytes, and then I'll load the data into that. Once I've got my gold master, I can now reuse this over and over. I'll go ahead, if I want to create a subset, I'll go ahead and copy that to my target, whether it be a target environment for test or dev or QA or training, whatever that might be. So I'll go ahead and copy that to the target. Then I'll populate it with just the data that I want to insert into it. So multiple clients will use this different ways. So this subset could be populating all data for just 3 months, or you can get a little more creative. We've got one client who has clients that are both Department of Defense as well as commercial clients. They decided they wanted to create all their test environments with only commercial data. So in that case, what we do is they created a table which they called a white space, which has a list of the clients that they want to use for testing. We'll populate just the reference data for those clients, and we'll populate just the transactions for those clients. So that way they can create a very small subset just with the clients and the clients' data that they want. In that process, as I'm moving the data, as I mentioned, I can mask the data in the fly, or I can mask it as a separate process. Obviously, the advantage of doing it on the fly is you've got 100% assurance that there's no data that ever resides in the test environment that is unmasked. This approach gives you absolutely the smallest amount of storage. Also, one of the advantages, I don't have to go through any of that time-consuming resize process. So it's a very quick way to create a very small subset. The timing it takes to create this will be based on the amount of data that I insert. So the more data that I put in my initial gold master will make the time that I create the gold master a little bit longer, but it'll reduce the amount of time it takes to actually create the subset. So clients will trade off a little bit on how much they want to populate in the gold master versus how much they want to put in right in the subset process. I want to spend just a few minutes on the masking product. So I mentioned you can go ahead and mask the data in transit. A couple of things that we can do. One of the things that we have the ability to do is consistently mask across applications. So when I set up the masking, if you have a need to always mask the data consistently, for example, every time I mask a database, and if it sees my name, I want it to be changed to Roy Rogers, we have the ability to do that by creating a lookup table, and every time it goes to mask my name, it'll go to the lookup table, see it needs to be replaced with Roy Rogers, and insert that into the test environment. The beauty of this is I can do this not only with the same type of database, so example in this case Oracle, but if you have downstream testing that you need to do and it's in a SQL Server database or a DB2 database, we can use that same lookup table and mask those databases consistently as well. So even when you have downstream testing, we can consistently mask that. The other advantage we have is we've got prepackaged solutions for some of the major ERP applications, meaning we know what the metadata is in the Oracle E-Business Suite that needs to be masked. So we can sit down with you, and if you specify the data we are interested in masking is Social Security number, credit card, etc. We know what tables are, we know the relationship between those tables, and we can very quickly mask that data. If you're masking custom applications, or you've got packaged applications other than what I mentioned here, and you may not know where all the data, sensitive data is, we have a data discovery capability that can, based on pattern searches, recognize the data, let you know where the sensitive data is, and I can either search through the metadata of the application or I can search through the actual data itself, identify that data, and then you can go ahead and mask it. While I'm focused my presentation here a lot on Oracle and the Oracle E-Business Suite, we do mask all major databases, Oracle, SQL Server, DB2, etc., and as you can see in the list here. We support the masking rules in both PL/SQL and TL/SQL and Java, so we can do both in Java or in the native application. And mentioned we can do both static and on-the-fly masking. So if you've got a masking requirement and not a subsetting requirement, you can use our product strictly for masking purposes. So you would create your clone as you do today, and then you can go ahead and mask it as a separate process. We've got multiple different masking algorithms. So we have the ability to shuffle the data, and I can be shuffling it at the field level, or I can be shuffling at the column level. So maybe I want to go ahead and shuffle all first names or all last names. I can do substitution, which is what I was referring to doing the table lookup. I can do basic masking, where maybe I want to just mask the first X digit from the left or the X digit from the right. We also support nulling, commonly used when you've got text fields or flex fields in a database where you don't know where sensitive data might be. We can just go ahead and null it. And we also have a algorithm that can encrypt and de-encrypt. So when we mask the data, we're doing that right at the database level. So once it's masked, that data is changed. But if we use the encryption, de-encryption, that is the one algorithm that allow us to go ahead and unencrypt or de-encrypt the data if required. As part of the algorithms, we've got a set that is very data type specific, such as date of birth or credit card, Social Security number, and then we've got many generic, random number generated, et cetera. So there's about 25 different algorithms. So let me just go ahead and sort of conclude, what are the advantages that Solix provides with our test data management. One, and the biggest one, is to reduce storage. So that is the primary goal of our solution, which is why we call it the Optimize Your Test Data Management. So again, the whole idea is to create the right size. So you have the ability to insert the amount of data that you're looking for that particular subset. Includes multiple methods. I've focused primarily on the gold insert method. Again, it's the most commonly used. But we do support the other methods, and again, if you're just creating a small subset, the delete or the truncate may be more beneficial at that time as well. Do have pre-built templates for many of the ERP applications, particularly Oracle Business Suite, JDE, PeopleSoft, and Siebel. What that means is we already know the tables and relationships for those tables that should be subset, and those are the primary transaction tables. We know those relationships, so we know when we're going to create a subset that we want to create it based on the complete transaction, and that's how we maintain the referential integrity of the application. Obviously, the ability to mask on the fly. Many people can mask as a separate process. We can actually mask it while we're moving the data. And John touched on this briefly. So this is part of an overall solution. From a single platform, you can use this product to create the small subsets. You can also use it for database archiving. You can also use it for application retirement. The beauty of this system is because this product was developed from ground up by Solix, we can reuse many of the same components. So in our system, we'll provide that what we call the knowledge base or the metadata for that particular application. And we'll use those same knowledge base or metadata, whether we're going to use archiving or subsetting. So from a usability standpoint, it makes it very easy and also shortens the length of time to do implementations, as many people who will do subsetting will also do archiving as well. And then lastly, while we won't go into this, we do provide multiple pricing models. The traditional perpetual model, where you buy the product up front, but we also offer an annual subscription model. So a great way to get into the system for a very low fee, and it very matches people who are looking for payment on an on-demand approach. With that, I want to go ahead and stop and open it up for questions. So please go ahead and just send us the questions via chat, and I'll try to catch them and then answer them or send them off to John. I've also asked one of our pre-sales person, Sandeep, and one of our consultants, Pramod, to join us. So if you end up with some technical questions that I'm not able to answer, I can turn it over to our team here as well. All right, so I see some of the questions are coming, so let me go ahead and take the first one. First question is, how long does it take to create a typical subset? Great question, and obviously it's going to depend a little bit on two things. One is how much data we're inserting to it, and how big is the database. But typically it takes about 24 hours to create that gold master, and then about another 24 hours to go ahead and do the insert process. So the goal is end-to-end process to be about a 48-hour process. And again, I just want to add, when we're doing the insert method, this really is targeted for keying in small amount of data. If you wanted to populate a subset with 3 years or 5 years worth of data, then we'd recommend using one of the other methods, the truncate or the delete method. The insert process would take too long. All right, here's a second question. How do you keep the gold master up to date with the production patches? Great question. So clients, I've seen clients do this two different ways. One is they'll create the gold master, and the client who I mentioned who used this system that we created the system initially for, what they'll do is they'll take that copy and they will use that for the next 3 months. So as they're creating test environments for the next 3 months, they will just reuse that gold master and just insert the data from the copy of production, from that copy of production that they created, and they will not bother to keep it in sync. The second method I've seen is you can always patch the gold master and keep it up to date that way. And the third method, which is probably the most common, is when they're going to go ahead and create the new subsets, they'll go ahead and create the gold master at that time. They'll then create a subset that may have 6 months of data, and then from that they'll create further subsets from that subset. So you can do a sort of a cascade effect. All right, next question. Is masking included as part of the subsetting solution? Yes, it is included, but you can also buy masking as a separate product as well. Does subsetting work with custom applications? Yes, it does. The process that we use to create the gold master will vary. So we've created a very extensive process specifically for Oracle Business Suite. For the custom applications, we would use a little bit of different process to create the Gold Master, but once you have the Gold Master, then we'd use the same process to insert the data. These are great questions. All right, here's another one. For Oracle Business Suite, are you subsetting all modules? Typically not. So what most clients will do is subset only the very large modules. So you may have implemented 15, 20 or more different modules, but when we look at the data, we'll see that of those, maybe 5 or 10 have the bulk of the data. So it's definitely the 20-80 rule, and we will subset only those large modules, and that way it's the most cost-effective method for doing it. Does the system support R12 as well as 11i? Yes, we are certified or validated by Oracle for both 11i and R12. Is a trial version available? So we do have a trial version available called Solix SE, and that can be used for masking, and it can be used for custom archiving. We do not have a trial version for the subsetting, but we would be happy to. Your local salesperson would be happy to work with you on something along those lines. If I was to implement archiving and subsetting, is there any recommendation on which to implement first? What I see is typically we probably recommend implementing archiving first. That way we can remove as much data as possible, and then subsetting we can at that point make it smaller. That being said, there are many situations we've had where IT has had a need to reduce storage. They felt it was easier to implement subsetting because they didn't have to work with the business users to determine what the retention policy was. So they'll start with subsetting first, and then we'll leverage that when we go ahead and implement archiving. Can the solution work with large Oracle E-Business Suite databases? It definitely can. We're in the process of implementing this for a large healthcare organization, and they've got a 25 terabyte Oracle E-Business Suite database. What infrastructure is required for Solix? Good question. I forgot to discuss that in the presentation. So our system is 100% J2EE, so it sits on a application server. Typical application server can be installed on Linux, Unix, or Windows. We also support virtual servers. And probably most common is a virtual server, a Linux virtual server, either 4 or 8 core, and either 8 or 16 gigs of memory, and about 30 gigabytes of storage. We do provide a application server software, Apache Tomcat, as part of our download as well. So we provide all the software you need for that. All right. Let's see if we've got any other questions. All right, one last question just came in. Does this solution work with big data? If not, what are you doing with big data? John, let me put that over to you, and why don't you spend a few minutes in talking about what we're doing with big data.
Okay, thank you, Russ. So in this summer, Solix released a major new product called the Solix Big Data Suite. It's focused on 2 application areas. One is enterprise archiving, and that is essentially the result of moving production data to nearline storage for the purpose of reducing the data growth impact on production systems, improving performance, reducing the cost of production systems, and essentially archiving or moving production data to a nearline storage. And the second area, application area, is called data lake, which is a very fast-growing approach to establish an enterprise data warehouse strategy, where essentially what you're doing is moving. You're not moving. You're actually copying production data to a place where it can be staged for later use by data marts or other analytics applications. And all of this really establishes sort of a new blueprint for managing nearline and data lake type of application areas. What we do for those applications is we provide the information lifecycle management framework to manage all that data, which means retention policies. It means classifying the information that's in those large data archives and data lakes, securing it, and just generally managing it. Today we don't subset directly on big data. It's specifically the solution is for relational databases such as IBM DB2, Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, MySQL, etc.
Great. Thank you, John. All right. Any other questions coming? These are great questions. Appreciate you folks sending them in. Let's just give it a minute and see if we've got any more. If not, then we'll go ahead and conclude this. I just want to point out this is just one of a series that we do for these webinars. We have separate additional webinars that are on our website that you can go to, and many of these are customer webinars. We've got one on subsetting. We've got, on masking. We've got retirement, archiving as well. So please feel free to go to the website and take a look at those as well. And again, we do have a standard edition product. It's a free download that if you'd like to go ahead and do the download and play with the product a little bit, it's a great way to get a feel for the product. Again, it's focused on primarily on masking, archiving, and it does have an assessment script part of it as well. So if you're thinking about doing archiving, it has the ability to tell you, take a look at the database, tell you how you might benefit from it, the size of the data, how much we might be able to pull out of it. So it's a great little tool to give you a good feel on whether you might benefit from archiving as well. No additional questions have come in, so at this I'll go ahead and close it out. John, I want to thank you for attending the webinar. For all of those who've been on the line here and staying with us, I appreciate it. And again, if you have any other questions that come up, please feel free to go ahead and email those to us. And I think we've got, so here's the phone number for Solix. Again, my name is Russ Puryear, and we've got John. Feel free to send those in and contact us, and we'd be happy to provide a presentation and demonstration for you. Thank you very much.